Before Noah built the ark, before Moses parted the sea, there was Enoch, the man who walked with God and vanished. Across the long history of sacred stories, few figures are as mysterious as Enoch. In the Bible, he is mentioned only in passing, a brief note in the genealogies of Genesis. Yet, hidden beyond the familiar pages lies an ancient text, a lost story that reveals the incredible journey of a man who crossed the boundary between earth and heaven. This is not just the story of a holy man. It is a story of angels who abandoned their place in the heavens, of forbidden knowledge that changed humanity forever, of giants who once walked the earth. It is a story of visions so powerful they reveal the inner workings of creation itself. Before we dive into this forgotten story, it is important to understand something clearly. The Book of Enoch was not removed from the Bible. It was never included in most traditions to begin with. Its fate was shaped by debates over theology and belief, not by conspiracy or suppression. What you are about to hear is the full story of Enoch, the one every true seeker deserves to know. The Watchers, the Nephilim, the journeys through heaven, the visions of judgment and redemption. All of it, a story of wonder and warning, of a humanity once closer to the divine than we can imagine. And it all begins with a man who walked with God, and then was not. Before the flood changed the face of the earth, before the tablets of law were given to Moses, before any written scripture, there was one man who lived so closely with God that he left the world behind and entered the realms of heaven. That man was Enoch. What sets Enoch apart from every other ancient figure is the mystery surrounding his fate. Enoch was the seventh generation from Adam and the great-grandfather of Noah. He lived in a world that was raw and wild, a world still being shaped. Before there were great kingdoms, before the flood wiped the earth clean, there was Enoch. And even in those early days, his story stood out like a light in the darkness. In the book of Genesis, tucked between long lists of names and lifespans, there is one line that changes everything. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Every other patriarch's life ends the same way, with the simple words, "And he died." But not Enoch. There is no description of death, no mention of sickness or old age, just the mystery of disappearance. Many traditions believe this was no ordinary end. Enoch was taken by God, lifted from the earth without facing death. His departure was not a punishment, but a reward. His life had reached a point of such deep connection with the divine that the natural order no longer applied. He crossed the boundary that separates the mortal from the eternal. To walk with God is one of the highest honors in all of Scripture. It means more than obedience. It speaks of friendship, trust, and living in constant awareness of the divine presence. Enoch's life reflected this rare closeness. In a world growing more corrupt each generation, he remained pure. He became a living bridge between heaven and earth. Later writings, especially the ancient Book of Enoch, offer an even deeper vision of who he was. They describe him as a scribe of heaven, trusted with secrets hidden from all other humans. Enoch sees the inner workings of creation itself. He watches the fall of the rebellious angels. He learns the movements of the stars and the hidden structure of the cosmos. He records the unfolding destiny of the world. Over time, Enoch's story only grew larger. In Jewish mysticism, some believed he became the archangel Metatron, a powerful figure who stands beside the throne of God. Others saw Enoch as the first mortal to find the path beyond death through wisdom, faith, and divine favor. Long before it was hidden and forgotten, the Book of Enoch shaped the imagination of ancient believers. While Enoch's story barely fills a few lines in the Bible, an entire book bearing his name emerged from the spiritual traditions of early Judaism. This book offers visions so vast and revelations so detailed that it continues to capture the minds of seekers thousands of years later. The Book of Enoch was originally written in Ge'ez, an ancient Ethiopian language, but its roots stretch even deeper into Jewish history. Fragments of the text were discovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls in the caves of Qumran. where they lay untouched for nearly 2,000 years. Their survival was a miracle in itself, a whisper from the ancient world reaching out across the centuries. These fragments confirmed what some had long suspected, that the Book of Enoch had once held a respected place among the early faithful. For centuries, the Book of Enoch circulated quietly, inspiring mystics and scholars who sensed there was more to the ancient world than the official scriptures revealed. It spoke of hidden realms, of fallen angels, of celestial mysteries that could not easily be explained away. It offered a vision of reality that was vast, terrifying, and beautiful. Today, the complete Book of Enoch survives mainly because it was preserved by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. In Ethiopia, it was not just a curiosity, it was scripture. While other traditions debated its place, the Ethiopians copied it by hand, guarded it through war and upheaval, and treated it as a vital piece of divine revelation. In a way, the book's survival feels almost like destiny, as if it was meant to remain hidden until the time was right for its wisdom to be heard again. The Book of Enoch is not a single story. It is made of 5 major sections, each offering a different glimpse into the unseen world. The first section is called the Book of the Watchers. It tells of angels who descended to earth, the birth of giants, and the corruption that followed. The second section, the Book of Parables, also known as the Similitudes, introduces visions of judgment, the coming of the elect one, and the final triumph of righteousness. The third section is the Astronomical Book, a detailed account of the movements of the heavenly bodies. To modern readers, it might seem strange, but to the ancients, the stars and their rhythms were living signs of divine order. Understanding them was not just about tracking seasons, it was about glimpsing the mind of God. The fourth section, the Dream Visions, recounts symbolic dreams that reveal the course of human history, the struggle between good and evil, and the ultimate fate of the world. The final section, the Epistle of Enoch, offers moral teachings, prophetic warnings, and a vision of the great renewal that lies beyond judgment. Though the Book of Enoch held deep influence over early Jewish and Christian thought, it was never officially made part of the Jewish canon. Later, most Christian traditions also chose to leave it outside their Bibles. Its vivid descriptions of multiple heavens, its complex hierarchies of angels, and its bold visions of cosmic judgment made it a dangerous text. It spoke of a universe that was wild and alive, far beyond human control. For many religious leaders, this was simply too much. They preferred simpler teachings, ones easier to interpret, easier to regulate. The Book of Enoch, with its grand and terrifying revelations, faded from the center of faith but never disappeared entirely. It continued to echo in the background, influencing later works like the Book of Daniel, the Revelation of John, and the mystical traditions that sought to pierce the veil between this world and the next. The Book of Enoch is not a forgotten relic. It is a window into a time when humanity dared to imagine the full majesty and mystery of the divine. And through its pages, the lost knowledge of an ancient world still speaks to us today. Before the flood, before judgment, there was a rebellion. Not among men, but among angels. They were called the Watchers. Sent by God to observe the world, they stood as silent guardians, meant to witness creation unfold without interfering. For countless generations, they obeyed. But when they looked upon the daughters of men and saw their beauty, a new desire stirred within them. Curiosity became longing, longing became temptation, and heaven's perfect order began to tremble. The Book of Enoch tells us that a group of these angels made a fateful decision. 200 of them, led by a powerful being named Semyaza, descended to earth. Their meeting place was Mount Hermon, a towering peak that would forever bear the weight of their betrayal. There they bound themselves with an oath, swearing that none would turn back, no matter the cost. These angels took human wives and fathered children with them. But these were not ordinary offspring. They were the Nephilim, giants in both size and wickedness. They filled the earth with violence, towering over humanity, consuming everything in their path. Crops, animals, even people were not spared. Their hunger knew no limit, and their strength made them nearly unstoppable. Yet the corruption ran deeper still. The Watchers, once keepers of divine knowledge, now revealed sacred secrets to humankind. They taught the arts of war, forging swords and knives from iron. They unveiled the mysteries of enchantments and sorcery, twisting spiritual power into dark manipulation. They taught astrology, revealing the movements of the stars, not for wisdom, but for control. They even taught the crafting of cosmetics and jewelry, turning natural beauty into an instrument of vanity and seduction. Knowledge that had once been reserved for the celestial realm was poured recklessly into human hands, but it was a poisoned gift. Civilization advanced in power but regressed in spirit. Lust, greed, and cruelty flourished. The earth itself groaned under the weight of this corruption. From heaven, the cries of the world rose up like a bitter offering. What had once been a garden of life was becoming a battlefield of giants and broken souls. The balance of creation was shattering. And at the center of this collapse were the Watchers, angels who had turned their gaze away from the throne and toward their own desires. The fall of the Watchers was more than an act of rebellion. It was a cosmic rupture. They had violated the sacred boundary that separated the divine from the mortal. By giving forbidden knowledge to humanity, they had planted seeds of destruction that would echo through every future generation. The Book of Enoch makes it clear. What followed was not merely punishment. It was a reckoning written into the very fabric of the universe. Judgment would not be delayed. Justice would not be bargained. The Watchers had chained themselves to their fate, as surely as they had chained humanity to suffering. But even as the sentence loomed, the Watchers made one desperate move. Stricken with fear and shame, they turned to the one man who still walked closely with God. The only man who had remained untainted by their corruption. The only man who might speak on their behalf. They turned to Enoch. When the mighty fall, they do not fall with defiance, they fall with terror. The Watchers had tasted the forbidden, and now they tasted fear. The earth they had corrupted groaned beneath their presence. The skies that once welcomed them were now closed and silent. And in that silence, they heard something far worse than anger. They heard the gathering storm of divine judgment. In their desperation, the Watchers turned to the one being they had not corrupted, Enoch, a man who still walked with God while they had fallen from grace. They did not merely ask, they pleaded. They begged him to carry their petition to heaven, to speak for them before the Most High, to ask for forgiveness where they dared not even lift their eyes. Enoch agreed to be their messenger, but this was no simple journey. He was summoned beyond the bounds of earth, into the higher realms where mortal flesh was never meant to tread. Guided by loyal angels, Enoch ascended through the layers of heaven. Each layer revealed deeper mysteries, realms of light and power so overwhelming that human language struggles to describe them. He passed through the dwelling places of the righteous. He beheld the prisons of the fallen. He saw the great halls where the heavenly hosts moved like living stars across the sky. Finally, Enoch was brought before the throne of glory. There, the presence of God blazed brighter than 1,000 suns. Around the throne, fiery beings called seraphim and cherubim sang songs that shook the very foundations of existence. It was here, in the very heart of the divine realm, that Enoch delivered the Watchers' petition. He spoke the words of their plea. He asked for mercy, for forgiveness, for restoration. He asked if the fallen could ever be restored to their former place. The answer was swift and absolute. There would be no mercy, no restoration. The Watchers had not simply sinned against a law. They had shattered the order of creation itself. Their crimes had unleashed suffering and chaos into the world, and the balance had to be restored. For their rebellion, they would be bound in chains beneath the earth until the great day of judgment. Their Nephilim offspring would be wiped away by a great flood that would cleanse the world. Their names would become a warning to all creation about the price of disobedience. Enoch returned to earth bearing this terrible decree. He stood before the watchers and pronounced their fate. The angels who had once shone like fire now cowered before a mortal, hearing their doom from lips of flesh. But something had changed in Enoch too. This journey had transformed him. He was no longer merely a man who walked with God. He had become a messenger of divine will, a scribe of heaven's judgment. He had looked upon the inner workings of the cosmos and survived. From that moment forward, Enoch would no longer simply observe the unfolding of history. He would shape it, recording visions and revelations that would echo through every age to come. In a world spiraling toward destruction, Enoch had become a living bridge between the mortal and the eternal, a man carrying the voice of heaven itself. What if a man could walk beyond the stars and live to speak of what he saw? After delivering the judgment upon the watchers, Enoch was no longer just a messenger. He had entered the courts of heaven, stood in the presence of the Most High, and returned transformed. But his journey was not over. It had only just begun. The Book of Enoch tells us that he was summoned again, this time not to deliver a message, but to witness. Enoch was chosen to see the workings of the cosmos with human eyes. Heaven would open its layers, and he would walk through them one by one, guided by angels who served as his protectors and teachers. Each realm revealed a different part of divine reality. The first taught him about justice, where the souls of the dead waited in different chambers, separated by the lives they had lived. The righteous were at peace. The wicked were restless. Enoch learned that judgment was not just a final moment. It was a process already unfolding behind the veil. In another realm, he was shown the forces of nature, not as blind mechanics, but as intelligent beings. The winds, the stars, the sun and moon, all moved according to sacred rhythms. They followed paths laid out from the beginning of time, obeying laws too vast for any human mind to fully grasp. Creation itself was alive with intention. He was taken to see the tree of life, radiant and still, growing in the center of paradise. Around it waited the souls of the righteous, clothed in light, preparing for the world to come. He saw mountains made of crystal, rivers that glowed with wisdom, and places where time stood still. These were not poetic symbols. They were spiritual realities, structured and ordered for a purpose. In the deepest part of his journey, Enoch was brought near the abyss, a chasm of darkness where the fallen were imprisoned. It was a place of judgment, reserved not just for the watchers, but for all who would twist creation away from its divine pattern. The contrast between paradise and punishment was total, and Enoch was made to understand the justice behind it. But what truly marked his journey was not just what he saw, but what he came to know. He began to understand how everything was connected. The cycles of the heavens mirrored the rise and fall of empires. The choices of human hearts echoed in the rhythms of nature. The visible world was only the surface. Beneath it, there was a design, vast, delicate, and alive. Enoch was not just a visitor. He was appointed as a scribe. He was commanded to write down everything he saw, the courses of the stars, the fates of the righteous, the secrets of time. He became the recorder of heaven's order, the first human to receive and preserve knowledge on a cosmic scale. In the Book of Enoch, we don't just glimpse heaven. We are shown that it is real, structured, and purposeful. A place where nothing is random and no soul is forgotten. A place where wisdom flows like water and judgment burns like fire. And at the center of it all stands a man, flesh and blood, yet now something more. Chosen not only to witness the sacred, but to carry it back, to bring heaven to earth in words that still echo today. That man was Enoch. What if you could see the future, not in fragments, but in full? Not just your life, but the destiny of the world itself. As Enoch journeyed through the layers of heaven, his visions deepened. He was no longer just a witness to cosmic order. He became a prophet, entrusted with glimpses of what was yet to come. The Book of Enoch records these revelations, and they are among the most powerful and haunting prophecies in all of spiritual history. One of the first visions Enoch received was a warning of a great flood, a mighty cleansing that would wash the earth of its corruption. The Nephilim and the violence they had spawned would be swept away. Humanity, tainted but not abandoned, would be given a second chance. And at the center of that survival would stand a descendant of Enoch himself, his great-grandson, Noah. But the flood was only the beginning. In what is known as the Book of Dream Visions, Enoch was shown the long future of humanity through living symbols. He saw the children of men appear as sheep, while their enemies took the forms of wolves, lions, and wild beasts. He witnessed a great tower built from human pride, reaching toward the heavens, a clear foreshadowing of the Tower of Babel, only to see it shattered by divine judgment. He saw the sheep enslaved by wolves, a vision of Israel's suffering under the cruelty of Egypt. Shepherds were appointed to guide the flock, but many led the sheep astray, a warning of corrupt leaders and false prophets who would rise among the people. The visions continued. Enoch saw 70 shepherds, rulers and overseers across generations, entrusted with the flock but failing in their duties. These were the empires and kings that would rule over Israel, from Assyria to Babylon, from Persia to Greece, and finally, to Rome. Throughout these ages, he watched the faithful devoured by the wicked. Yet nothing escaped the gaze of heaven. Every injustice, every betrayal, every lost soul was recorded by angels, written into the eternal books awaiting final judgment. History would not be a simple path forward. It would be a battlefield of predators and faithful souls, watched by the Most High. More than anything, Enoch's visions focused on a figure he called the Elect One, or the Son of Man. This being would emerge in the distant future, chosen by God to bring final justice to the world. He would judge kings and rulers, lift up the righteous, and crush the forces of evil once and for all. The Elect One would not be a simple prophet or king. He would have authority given directly by God. His coming would mark the turning point of all history. In him, mercy and justice would be perfectly united. He would sit on a throne of glory, surrounded by the righteous, while the wicked would face the consequences they could no longer escape. Enoch's prophecies in many ways laid the foundation for later apocalyptic visions. The Book of Daniel, centuries later, would echo the same themes: a son of man coming on the clouds, judgment for the nations, the triumph of the faithful. And the Christian Book of Revelation would carry these ideas even further, painting a final picture of cosmic renewal. Early Christian writers, especially in the first few centuries, saw deep connections between the Elect One of Enoch and the figure of Christ. They recognized the language, the imagery, the sense of a world teetering on the edge of divine intervention. Yet, despite these resonances, the Book of Enoch itself was never formally accepted into the Christian canon. Its visions were too expansive, too strange, too rooted in the mysterious traditions that the early church was trying to organize and simplify. But for those willing to listen, Enoch's prophecies still whisper from the ancient past. They speak of a justice greater than any earthly court, of a future not built by human ambition, but by divine design. They remind us that history is not a straight line, but a tapestry, one that will one day be completed by hands not our own. In a world that often feels chaotic and broken, Enoch's visions offer both warning and hope. They tell us that corruption will not last forever, that righteousness is not forgotten, that even when the heavens seem silent, the divine plan moves steadily forward. And at the center of it all, once again, stands Enoch, a man who saw the flood before it came, a man who glimpsed the final judgment before history had even begun to unfold. Is it possible that some sacred knowledge was not erased by fire and sword, but set aside because it spoke of a universe too vast for the powers of men? The Book of Enoch was once a treasured work among early Jewish and Christian communities. It was read, copied, and discussed. Echoes of its ideas can be found woven into the fabric of later scriptures. Yet today, it stands outside the official canon of both Judaism and most branches of Christianity. Many wonder why. Was it suppressed? Was it too dangerous? The truth is both simpler and more profound. The Book of Enoch was never formally removed. It was never part of the central canon to begin with. In the early centuries, different Jewish groups held different collections of sacred texts. Some revered Enoch. Others preferred simpler, more practical scriptures. As time passed, the communities that shaped the Bible leaned toward texts that reinforced clear doctrines and established religious authority. Enoch's sprawling visions of cosmic battles, multiple heavens, and angelic hierarchies were simply too vast, too wild, too difficult to contain within the emerging frameworks of official theology. When the Hebrew Bible was formalized, likely between the 1st and 2nd centuries after Christ, the Book of Enoch was left outside. It lingered in the background, respected by some, forgotten by many. Early Christians, especially in the first 2 centuries, continued to read and reference it. In fact, the New Testament itself contains a direct echo of Enoch's teachings. The Epistle of Jude quotes from the Book of Enoch almost word for word, describing the Lord coming with thousands of his holy ones to execute judgment upon the wicked. This shows that, for the earliest Christians, Enoch's visions were not yet seen as strange or forbidden. They were part of the living spiritual imagination of the time. Yet as Christianity became more structured, more concerned with orthodoxy, Enoch's visions began to seem dangerous. They opened doors to mystical interpretations that leaders could not easily control. One major concern was the book's complex angelology, its detailed accounts of fallen angels, heavenly realms, and cosmic judgment. These ideas risked drawing believers into questions about the nature of angels, demons, and the unseen world that the early church was not yet ready to fully answer. There were also fears about multiple heavens, conflicting with the simpler images of heaven and hell that were easier to teach and enforce. By the 4th century, the boundaries of Christian scripture were being solidified. Councils like those at Hippo and Carthage formalized the canon of the New Testament, and texts like the Book of Enoch were quietly set aside. Not banned, not burned, simply excluded. They were seen as too complex, too apocalyptic, too deeply tied to traditions that no longer fit the direction the church was taking. Yet in Ethiopia, the story was different. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church, tracing its lineage back to some of the earliest Christian communities, preserved the Book of Enoch as sacred scripture. For centuries, the ancient manuscripts of Enoch were not simply copied, they were guarded. Hidden deep within the sacred monasteries of Ethiopia, access to them was restricted, protected by generations of priests who believed that some wisdom was too holy to be exposed to the careless or the curious. Even today, the oldest copies remain treasures of faith, shielded from the world beyond. There was no grand conspiracy to hide the Book of Enoch, no council of dark-robed figures erasing forbidden wisdom. The truth is quieter, but no less powerful. The Book of Enoch was left behind because it spoke a language too vast, too wild, and too full of mystery for the world that was being built. But for those who still seek it, the voice of Enoch still calls across the ages, a reminder that the divine cannot be fully caged by human hands. What if the man who walked with God never truly disappeared, but lived on in secret traditions, hidden from the eyes of the world? After the Book of Enoch faded from public scripture, its story did not vanish. It slipped into the hidden currents of mystical thought, carried forward by those who still believed there was more to the world than what the eye could see. In Jewish mysticism, especially in the Kabbalah, Enoch was seen not just as a righteous man, but as one who transcended humanity itself. Some traditions teach that Enoch was transformed into the archangel Metatron, a being of immense power who stands beside the throne of God. As Metatron, Enoch became a bridge between heaven and earth, a symbol of what humanity might one day become. In Christian mysticism, Enoch's legacy also grew. Medieval thinkers, fascinated by heavenly visions and the nature of angels, drew inspiration from his story. They saw him as proof that mortal beings could ascend to divine realms and that the journey to God was not just for saints, but for any soul brave enough to seek the higher worlds. Centuries later, during the Renaissance, the English scholar John Dee and his assistant Edward Kelly claimed to have revived the lost knowledge of Enoch. Through their strange rituals, they said they received a new language from the angels, a heavenly tongue they called Enochian. Though their system was an invention, the fact that they chose Enoch's name shows how deeply his legend had sunk into the roots of Western magic and mysticism. Even today, echoes of Enoch's story survive. In modern esoteric traditions, Enoch is sometimes linked to the lost civilization of Atlantis, imagined as a guardian of ancient knowledge before the flood wiped the world clean. In the late 1800s, theosophical writers like Helena Blavatsky described hidden masters who had preserved cosmic wisdom across the ages. Among them, Enoch was sometimes named as one of the great beings who survived the fall of ancient civilizations to guide humanity's spiritual evolution. The idea grew. Secret societies like the Rosicrucians, who emerged in Europe in the early 1600s with manifestos like the Fama Fraternitatis, spoke of ancient brotherhoods protecting sacred knowledge. The Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor, founded in the late 19th century, wove Enoch into their mythologies as a bridge between the wisdom of Atlantis and the rebirth of spiritual science. Later, the Great White Brotherhood, a mystical council of ascended masters popularized by New Age movements, would also sometimes count Enoch among its secret teachers, guiding the unseen destiny of the world. Even within Freemasonry, traces of Enoch's legend survived. In Royal Arch Masonry, stories told of Enoch hiding sacred relics and inscriptions deep beneath what would later become the Temple of Solomon, preserving divine knowledge for a future age when humanity would be ready to receive it. Though these interpretations are imaginative rather than historical, they reveal something powerful. Across centuries and continents, the figure of Enoch continues to stir the human longing for hidden wisdom and lost truths waiting to be found. The Book of Enoch is not just a forgotten text. It is a spark that lit fires across centuries, across religions, across visions of what humanity could one day become. And at the center of it all stands Enoch, the man who crossed the threshold between earth and heaven, and whose story still calls to those who seek the mysteries beyond the veil. The Book of Enoch offers no simple ending. It leaves us with a mystery, a man taken by God, a journey unfinished, a destiny still unfolding. Enoch's story is not just a memory, it is a mirror. Across the ages, his journey continues to call to something ancient inside us, the longing to walk with the divine, to step beyond the boundaries of death, to find the path that leads from dust to light. Before Noah built the ark, before Moses parted the sea, there was Enoch, a man who lived so closely with God that he left this world without tasting death. A man whose faith, vision, and righteousness opened a doorway few have ever glimpsed. Some see in Enoch a prophet, others see a scribe of heaven, a messenger, a judge. Still others see a symbol of what humanity itself was meant to become, beings of spirit and wisdom, moving not just through time, but across the great currents of the cosmos. Perhaps that is why his story endures, not because it answers every question, but because it dares to point beyond them, toward a reality where mortality is not the end, and where those who seek with pure hearts might one day walk the same path. And Enoch walked with God, and was not. Enoch witnessed the hidden forces that move behind everything we see. Those forces are still at work, shaping vibration, shaping form, shaping consciousness itself. Watch this video next to start learning how to change your own vibrational frequency and reshape your future.